Hi there, good morning or happy midday in Bulgaria. It's midday, which is 10 o'clock GMT in England, I guess. Today we're going to do a mountain scene, which I can't actually remember who suggested this one. So perhaps if it was you, you could let me know. And thank you for the suggestion. We're going to do it in, I'm going to use a blue, and it's a lesson about tonal painting and how to mix different tones and how to achieve distance in your painting. This is the drawing that I put online. We're painting on Hannen Mule 450 gram paper today, just for a change. I happen to have a piece mounted, and it's just taped down onto a board with just normal masking tape. Now, aerial perspective is important in your paintings. If you've ever done a painting and it looks flat, probably the reason for that is that you haven't achieved distance in the painting. So if painting from back to front, then let's say with this mountain scene, which is based on a scene that I saw in Borovets in Bulgaria, we have, I'll just do a pointer here, we have number one. This is like painting by numbers, this. So number one is the lightest thing in the painting. Number two is the next darkest thing in the painting, and so forth. So we come forward, strengthening the colour all the time. Now, if this was, sorry, the tone of the painting, if this was a coloured painting, you'd also make the colours in these areas gradually become warmer, and warmer colours advance and cooler colours recede. You may hear some background noise. Somebody's just started to, I think, chop their logs with the chainsaw outside, so excuse the country noises. So welcome to the Whiteboat Studio. We're not actually there at the moment. We're here in the village again with a good internet, and we've got the wood burning stove, so it's gone a bit cooler at this time of year. So we're here. Oh, there's somebody chopping the chopping the chainsaws now, chopping the logs now. Now, when you analyse a scene, obviously this one's quite simple. It's only got what they call planes. So each one of these sections, number 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, are different planes in the painting. And Sarah will tell you, oh sorry, this is Sarah, by the way. She's going to be in charge of the chat today, if anybody's joined us.
Hi.
So keep it clean for Sarah. Be gentle with her. So Sarah will tell you that when I go out and look at a scene, I always analyse it into the number of planes in the scene itself. So on this, it's just got 5 planes. We've got the sky, we've got the distant hills, the mid-distant hills, the hills nearer the foreground, and then finally this ski run, which comes down here. So for that, we need 5 different tones of paint. Now, I'm using one colour today, which is this one, which is Tintoretto's Ultramarine Violet.
We've got not watercolour and tony green today.
Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me. I'm just going to use a few brushes today, three round brushes and 1 flat brush. You'll see the reason for that. Now, I've prepared my palette, which has got 5 wells in it. Can you see that okay, Sarah? And I've added water to I've put a pea-sized lump of paint into each of these from the tube, and number 5 is going to be the deepest colour. So I don't know if you can see that water that I've already put in there. So number 5 is going to be the darkest one, number 4 is going to be the next one, and so forth. So it goes from light to dark. So we're going to produce a colour card which goes from number 5, the darkest one, to number 1, the lightest one. And you can see from the amount of water in there, if I just put a brush along there, this one's almost full of water, this one's hardly got any water, and these are kind of somewhere in between. These palettes lend themselves quite well to it because, well, there's only 5. That's why the painting's got 5 planes on today. So what we're going to produce from that is something like this. So number 5 will be the deepest paint and number 1 will be the lightest paint. And we're going to use them from back to front, so that the number 5 will be the darkest plane in the painting and number 1 will be the lightest. So I kept saying I wouldn't say so this week, but anyway, I did. At least it's better than well, basically. So this is, I'm going to produce a colour card, and the way that I do that is you can mess around with, I'll just move this painting out of the way for a little while, and I may sit down for this. So obviously I've got a reference here to refer to. This is one I did earlier. Sounds like Blue Peter. So number one, I'm going to wet my brush and just wipe it on this. I don't know if you can see this, Sarah. Am I in shot there? Can you see this on the side? Okay, so number one, I'm going to just wet my brush and I'm going to put all of this paint into this small amount of water. And I'm looking for the deepest tone in this painting. And I might nick some from another one as well. Let's nick some from number one because we know we're not going to need that one. So I'm mixing a real deep paint. I'm going to test it on the test strip before I move to my colour card because I don't want to commit to the colour until I'm absolutely sure. Let me just find a test strip. There we go. So this is number 5. And if I compare that to this one, you can see it's actually a little bit lighter. So I'm going to add some more of this paint. And I want that to be as dark as number 5 on my colour card. And you can see now that's very dark. So now I'm going to paint that onto my colour card for number 5. All will be revealed. Can you see that down there, Sarah?
Yep.
So I'm going to paint this. And that's my deepest tone in the painting. Then I'm going to wash my brush out and I'm going to turn my attention to number 4. So I'm looking to match this colour here. So I just keep adding this paint in. In theory I should be able to add all this paint into here and it'll come out about right. I'm just going to move to my test strip again before I mark my colour card, and you can see that that's too pale. So more paint. If you were doing this without a snow scene, obviously I'm going to leave some of the white paper. If you were doing this as a normal scene, you could just use an earth colour. I put something on Facebook and you could do this in sepia or any other colour. Right, you can see now from that it's dark, it's lighter than this, and it's about maybe a little bit deeper. So it's lighter than this. I think maybe I've overdone it, so let's just add a little bit of water. So we're looking for a graduation from one colour to the next. So now I'll move to my colour card. So this will be number 4. Can I move that up a little bit? Is it easy to see if it's there? This is number 4. And I'm going to wash my brush out again, and now I'm going to turn my attention to number 3. You should be able to judge these tones once you paint this colour card pretty accurately, and you'll know if you've gone too dark or too light, like I did on this test strip. So now this is number 3, so I'm looking for something around this kind of tone, and it's a little light, so I'm going to add a little bit more paint. All will be revealed. A little bit more. Oops, not that big blob. I think that's too dark. I picked up a blob there, so I add more water. So basically you add water to make it lighter and paint to make it darker. So I'm happy with that, and I'll be able to tell on here if it's right or wrong. And you can see now we're going from dark to medium. It's getting lighter on here. And now wash my brush out again, and I'm going to move to number 2. So add the paint to the water. Talk amongst yourselves. Sarah's yawning. Have we got anybody else on? So now I'm going to test my number 2. And you can see that that's pretty light. So I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to move that to number 2. And now onto the lightest tone. Wash my brush again right to the bottom of the pot. And you can see how watery this is. So there's hardly any pigment in this at all. And this is going to be for the sky. and that's the lightest tone. So you can see we've gone gradually from the darkest tone to the lightest tone. This one looks as if it's too close to this one, so I may just add a little bit more colour into that one. Yeah, that's better. So now we've got our 5 tones on our colour card, which if I check that against that, it's not dissimilar. This one's gone a little bit dark, but that's okay for this exercise. You can adjust these as you're painting. So let's turn our attention now to the painting. So I'll put this to one side.
Tony said hello to me, so I'm awake.
Say again?
Tony just said hello to that man awake still.
What, to you?
Yeah, to wake me up.
Go on, let's have a look at your little face, Sarah, just to make sure that you're still with us.
I am, honestly.
Sarah's got a director's chair this week. Oh, yeah? No, not really.
I was sacked last week.
Yeah. So this is how I paint a tonal scene. Now, I've drawn this quite heavily so that it would photograph well, but I don't want all these numbers on here, so obviously not. So I'm going to rub out all the numbers. I think it's fairly obvious. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sarah's yawning again. I don't know if the microphone picked that one up. I've been up since 3 this morning. I need about 6 hours sleep, and I had an early night last night. So I was up at 3 o'clock this morning. Okay, so we'll paint the sky wet into wet, which means that it's going to dilute the number 1 paint. So we may end up using number 2 paint. So first of all, I'm left-handed, so I paint right to left. And I'm just kind of tickling the sky, as we've done before with these lessons. I'm not going to leave any gaps, and I'm painting quite definitely around these mountains. If you want hard edge clouds, you can leave gaps, but I don't want to have any on this painting. We're going for quite I don't know, a nice optimistic looking sky. We've done our stormy sky, haven't we, a week or 2 ago.
Tony said they're all yawning now because I've been yawning.
Oh, it's like watching paint dry, isn't it, Tony? Sarah's bored stiff. As long as I don't fall asleep, we'll be all right. Actually, I've fallen asleep when I watched one of my own tutorials. Do you remember, Sarah?
Yeah.
I actually recorded myself snoring when I was doing a tutorial of my own. Maybe you could try and spot it on YouTube. I just found it so relaxing. So, so now I'm going back over the right-hand side of the painting. As it starts to dry, we've got quite a warm day because I've had the wood burning stoves on this morning. So going right around these mountains, and I'm going to go for paint number 1. And you may find that because it's wet, you can hardly see it. Can you see? No difference. So I'm going to go for number 2. If we'd have been painting this wet on dry, then you would have seen number 1 because it would have been against the white paper. So I'm just painting this, and don't forget that watercolour dries lighter. Just vary the mix from one side to the other. I'll have a little bit of number 3 in there as well, just for variety.
Pat's here, but she's had to go internet playing up. So
Is this Pat Kelly?
Yeah, she'll catch you later.
I hope it's your settings, Pat, this week and not mine. We tried to get a better microphone on this week, but I battled with it. So, and thank you to everybody that tried to help me out with my Windows 10 thing. It wasn't for this stream, you'll be happy to hear. It was just that we've got a new computer, which might be a bit quicker. So now we've done the sky, and then we let that dry. If you want movement in your sky, you can tip it up. I don't know if you can see that, can you, Sarah? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, Sarah's just going to put a little slideshow on just while I dry this hard edge with the hairdryer, and I don't want you to hear the sound. So I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so that's I've concentrated on this lower edge. If you wanted these edges to bleed, so if you wanted let's say there was snow blowing off the top of these mountains, then I would have just lifted up some highlights just with a moist brush or a bit of tissue if I was feeling desperate. So now I'm going for a smaller brush, and I'm going to my number 2 paint. So I don't know if you can see here, but this depicts the direction of the light from this scene. So the light's coming from the right. So I'm just going to paint this mountain. By the way, this is the first lesson that I usually teach when I'm doing an art holiday. And I know 1 or 2 people had said that they found that the lessons were a bit too advanced for a beginner, but this is usually the first one that I teach, because unless you understand the tones in a painting. So I've just literally put a wash on there. You may notice that I didn't do an outside line and fill it in. It's always bad practice because you can usually see the line. So now I've just washed my brush out, squeezed it through my fingers, so it's just slightly moist, and I'm going to lift some highlights out from the light side of this hill. Wash my brush out again, wipe it on my tissue, just have. So anything on the right hand side of this hill might be lit by the sun, so it just looks like we've got a ridge there. I presume you've closed in on that, have you, Sarah? Of course, she says. Right, normally I would wait for that to dry. If you want a hard edge, then you let it dry. If you want a softer edge, then you can carry on painting. So I'm going to assume that there might be some misty effects on this one. So with the same size brush, and now we're going into paint number 3. So you can see, if you check this, you've got number 1 of your sky, we've got number 2 as this one, we're now onto this colour. So painting it exactly the same way. And you may find that some of that paint will bleed up into that area. So I'm not doing an outline and filling it in. I'm kind of using a brush stroke in the direction of the contours of this hill. Now on this hill, so I'm just keeping a wet edge there, and that's important. At this distance you wouldn't see much in the way of details on a hill that was this far away. And as you come to these little corners, just lift your brush up vertically and it'll help you get into those little very important corners. So I'm reverse painting around the hill in front, if you like. Anybody commenting? Any queries so far?
Keller just rebooted a computer to join in.
Oh, well done, Pat. Right, so I'm going to do exactly the same. Light's coming from the right. I'll move this out of the way. So using a sideways sweep of the brush, think about where these ridges might be highlighted with a sun. So I'm just varying this. And so this area would be lighter here. And I want to keep this hard edge down here. And if you want mist, so let's assume this is down in the valley, we can actually do something, because this paint is still wet. I don't know if you can you see the shine on that, Sarah? So it's still shiny, so it's still okay to work on this area, and I'm going to just add some water to my brush, and I'm going to encourage a cauliflower down in this area here. And I'm just using a horizontal brush stroke, and I'm going to tip my board upside down, and you'll see here that it starts to bleed up into this colour and it bleaches it away, so it starts to look like mist. When you're happy with the result, turn it back down. So you can just see a misty effect just happening down there. Now I would normally dry this edge before I paint this, but for the sake of speed I'm going to carry on. What do you need, Sarah? Oh, we've got wasps in the house. How strange. Okay, right, now we painted these wet on dry. Sarah's just swatting it. Get it, Sarah. You're not a true Tolstoyan, are you? Okay, so now we painted these two hills and this. The sky was painted wet on wet, and these two hills were painted wet on dry. Now I want to try and indicate some more detail on this mountain. Now we're getting a bit nearer towards us, so I'm actually going to do this wet into wet. So I'm just using sideways sweeps of the brush. You can see it's bleeding slightly into there, but that's okay. I'm going to try and have some highlights on this ridge. So I'm using a flat brush stroke, and I'm just coming down, and I'm leaving some dry brush there. I don't know if you can see that, Sarah, or if you've fallen asleep again. Because it's such a dry day, I'm actually going to carry on with this area of the mountain. This mountain's quite big, and by the time I come to this side's going to have dried. So now I'm into paint number 4, which, just to remind you, will be this. It may end up being slightly lighter because obviously I'm painting it wet into wet. So now I'm just touching this and adding some streaks. But now, because the mountain's closer, we can see some of that snow lines and drifts and shadows on this hillside. Still on number 4. I want to leave some highlights on the right hand side of this mountain, but everywhere on the left hand side is going to be painted quite solidly, because that would be the dark side of the mountain. So now I'm going to switch to a bigger brush. There's no real rule about what size brush to use, but just use one that can whack the paint on as fast as you can get it on. So you won't be seeing much of the highlights on this side of the mountain. This, because this is ultramarine based paint, it will show the granulations, and it turns a lovely pink colour. Back into number 4, and I'm going to have some mist down in this bottom valley. Try and alter your brush angle and your brush strokes, and if you see a pattern emerging, just change something. So this is number 4 again, number 4 paint. I'm not going to do much lifting off there. There's nice kind of cauliflowers happening there. So now, just with a moist brush, I'm just going to soften this edge, and this is where I want a misty effect, as if we're looking down in the valley. Anybody from Wales? But I'm painting quite carefully now around the foreground hill. And I'm just going to tip that up so that the water goes into that wash. And you can see now that there's kind of misty effects appearing down there. If you want to emphasize those even more, just take a slightly moist brush and just lift out some of that paint. Sarah's yawning again. Wait until I join in your yoga class. And I'm just lifting up slightly using a sweeping motion on this with this big round brush. This is an Escoda brush from Joseph Zbudvik, and they're really nice. And also I may just, using a small brush now, I may just splash into this mountainside. Obviously we're getting to see some trees, and it just gives texture. So the nearer to our eye we get, the more detail you're seeing on this hillside. And now I want to tidy this edge up. So I don't know if you can close in on this area just here. So I'm using a big flat brush just to get the shape of this mountain back. You can see it looks a bit lost just there. So using a flat brush, just squeeze it between your thumb and forefinger and wipe it on the heel of your hand. That's the flattest part of your hand. And then just lift up that so we get that nice straight line back. And you can see now that we're getting distance in our scene. We've got the furthest hill, which has the least amount of detail, the mid-ground hill that's got some detail, and then the nearest hill, apart from this one, that's got this real highlights from where the sun's catching those ridges on the top. You can also lift out some ridges as well. Again, flat brush and just lift out some shapes, and it just looks more natural instead of having all hard edge marks. Again, just be aware of the ridges on that hillside. Let's have one down here. And just twist your brush. It's always nice if it joins up with another area. So now we've got a light side of the mountain and a dark side of the mountain with a misty effect going along this valley. So now if Sarah can just put the slideshow up again, I'm just going to dry this because it's important that this edge remains crisp and clean, because we're trying to give the impression that this mountain is about a mile away, this is about 3 miles away, this one's about 5 miles away. But this is the ski run that you're actually looking down on now. So I'm just going to dry that. Okay, so now we've got, if you can remember, we've got, you can see that number 6 we haven't used yet, number 5 we haven't used yet. Oh, number 6, it looks like a 6, look. It's because it's got a splodge of paint on. So we've used number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 and number 5. But they haven't used yet. Sarah's laughing now. Come on Sarah, let's see you laughing at me. Oh, the tears are rolling down her face. Senior moment there. Excuse me. Right, so now we're into the nearest hillside to us, and this is where dry brush comes into its own. So I'll just add a few sweeps with a small brush, sideways sweeps, and then straight into our number 5 paint. I'm going to follow those marks. And these are basically just the shadows of these ridges of where the snow is. And I'll soften some of these just with a slightly moist brush. We've got our friendly local dog coming now again. So I'll paint all the bottom corner with this. And you can see now that we've got real recession in the painting. We've got, let me just add a little bit more dark to this. So all we're really doing is painting the shadows of these ridges. And then finally, when that's all dry, you just simply rub out the pencil lines, and you've got your painting. So that was a very short one today. That was just 30 minutes long. These are based on, I'll be doing another lesson, and these are the basics of watercolour painting. So I'm going to do another short one, maybe later on today if we can, if it's light enough to paint. We might do this one later on in the afternoon just for our American audience. And it's to show the different washes, the different brush strokes, what to do and what not to do, emphasising the golden time. Sorry, is there any
I
questions?
was asked, you just soften one edge. Okay.
It doesn't really matter, Tony, as long as you just soften some edges. If you do all hard edges or all soft edges, it looks a bit strange. But if you do a combination of both, some hard edges and some soft edges, it seems to work with this painting. If this was a normal scene, let's say a mountain scene using earth colours, I would probably do the sky and the distant hills with a weak mix of, say, caput mortuum or neutral tint, and then introduce the browner colours in these mountains as we come into this foreground, into the midground and into the foreground. But that's how you get recession in your painting. And then I don't know if this is dry enough to rub out, and then when you rub out these pencil lines, you get a real crisp hard edge. I don't want to come into this foreground because I know that's still wet, but you get that lovely whiteness to these mountains. And that's how I would paint a snow scene, simply. And that's the first lesson that I usually teach on my painting holidays in Bulgaria, how to paint with just one colour. Next week's lesson will be floral architecture suggested by Glenda Abercrombie, and it'll be in the kind of style of Jean Haynes. If there's any suggestions about what you'd like me to paint next week or in the coming weeks, please drop me a line on my live streams by Martin Stephenson Facebook page, and that's about it for today. Is there anything else? Sorry, Sarah's mouthing at me. Come on, director.
You get started.
Oh yes, of course. I've been speaking to, obviously some of you will be members of art clubs and societies, and I've been speaking to a guy this morning called, what is his name? Baha Boru, who's from Ankara in Turkey, and there's a chance that he might come on a workshop, and this is his website. I made a mention of it last week, and he seems interested to come and do a workshop with us. And I put a link on this morning to Cafe Watercolours, which is an Asian chappie whose name I can't remember, but his tutorials are really nice as well. So check them out, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can have a look at my blog, which is artstevo.wordpress.com. If you'd like to make a donation, you can do it via Patreon or through my PayPal account, which is artstevo@gmail.com. And if you've got any queries about this lesson, I know it was a quick one today, but hopefully you've gleaned quite a lot of how to achieve distance in your paintings. It's all about aerial perspective. The further the things are away from you, the more atmosphere between you and them. So a hillside that we know is covered in trees still looks blue if it's in the distance because it's so far away. So I hope that was useful. Please post your attempts on either Paint Buddy or on live streams by Martin Stephenson, and keep in touch. And I'll be back here next week at the same time. As I say, we may end up cropping up later on at tea time, depending on the lighting, and doing this other lesson on the basics of watercolour painting. So thank you for joining me today. Sorry it's been so brief, but it's a quick lesson. Enjoy your day, and see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.